All right, as we start our journey here, this piece that we're putting together here was taken and was recorded on slides. I'm attempting today to change it and to record it on some VHS tapes. We have these in 1972. Betty and I were fortunate enough to have the opportunity of taking a vacation and going to Venezuela. We left St. Louis in late February. It was the last week, last few days in February and the first few days in February. I can't tell you the exact dates, but it was in 1972. And here we are. We're ready to leave on our Pan Am flight. It was a 707, Boeing 707 aircraft. It was a group of Wetterall Foods people, and we were leaving, going to go to Venezuela on a vacation for a week and a tour. And we're leaving here from St. Louis, and the flying time, believe it or not, from St. Louis to Venezuela, nonstop, by flying from St. Louis directly east, coming out over the South Carolina coast, flying down along the east coast of Florida, just skirting Cuba. In fact, in some of these, one of the pictures out of the windows, the pilot said if you look over there, you can see the island of Cuba. It's about 90 miles. And this is as close as I intend to get. And so we're going to move on here, and we'll change the slide, and we'll show you some of the pictures as we go. There we are at the airport, or at the hotel. It's the Makuta Sheraton Hotel. Very lovely hotel, and it too is at Makuta, which is just up the road from La Guaira, where the airport is. And this is where we stayed. We didn't stay in Caracas itself. We stayed here along the beach at this hotel, which is at Makuta, down along the Caribbean coast, right along the ocean. View of the hotel at a longer distance, showing you the beauty of it. And again, this was in late spring, and remember that Venezuela is still north of the equator. This is still wintertime down there, but their temperature just doesn't vary that much year-round. It only varies just a very few degrees, like 2 or 3 degrees on the average. And so it doesn't get extremely hot during the summer, nor does it get extremely cold during the winter. The only difference is that during the summer, the spring and summer, they get rain, and in the fall and later in the fall they get the less rain they have. And then when you get into the middle of the winter, which we're in now, just before spring, there's very little, if any, rain has fallen, and everything just goes into a state of dormancy because of the lack of rain. Okay, just another picture that was taken. This is another view of the hotel, and you can see the harbor there in front and many of the boats that are anchored there. And like I say, this is right along the Caribbean, and these boats, many of them are there, and they're very nice boats, and they take them out into the Caribbean. Now there's one thing that I should mention here, I guess. During the winter time, they get quite a lot of wind in this area, high winds, and they have a very rough and a lot of waves down there, which they don't have the rest of the year. And so we were there probably at the time that the water was the roughest of any time during the year, and we saw some pretty good waves. And along about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the breeze came up, and it came off of that ocean. And it wasn't cool, it wasn't so cold, it was just the fact that it hit you, and you wanted to be inside, and out of the breeze during that period of afternoon. Again, I'm just being pictures shot under a palm tree. You can see the cannas blooming there in the background to me. And this is part of the pool area. They have a pool there at the beach and a lot of outdoor eating. Most everything is done, or a lot of activities are held outside. There are just no insects down there, no flies or anything like that. And you can sit out there in this lovely area and in a little bit of shade and just eat and not be bothered by any flies or insects of any kind. So that's just a picture of me taken there at the hotel area, which the picture was taken of me. Now you can see through the cabana there, the covering, and you can see the pool and the people around it there in the background. Probably across from the pool is where the buffet is set up, and that's where the people will be eating their evening meal. Another view of the pool, you can see the tables and the chairs that are set around it. You can see the mountains. Those are the coastal mountains in the background. Remember, we're down here along the beach at Makuta, and those mountains are in the distance anywhere from 2 to 5 miles on the mountain. We get a lot of views of the hotel here, but basically that's what this is. And under that awning there, and where those people are where the buffets. We even had breakfast served out there every morning. You'd go out there every morning, be nice and warm, and had breakfast out there like you think Shoney's has a breakfast bar. There wasn't anything compared to what this hotel had as far as a breakfast bar. Trees that grows down there. We'll probably show you some more pictures, I think, in this sequence. I haven't really gone through them, and it's been several years since I've seen them. But if you look real close, you can probably see the coconuts up there in a tree. And why this was taken was that there was a street crew working down along there, and it came time for a break. And these fellas, excuse me, to take their break, just took the truck, and it had a dump bed on it. It was an old Dodge truck, as I remember, had a dump bed on it. And one guy got up on the bed of that truck, and they raised it up, and he just climbed up that coconut tree, and he cut these coconuts down, and they cut them in two. They drank the milk out of them, and then they ate the meat, and that was their breaks. They didn't have to take donuts or go to a Casey's or somewhere to get donuts and coffee. They just shimmied up the tree here and got their own tropical flowers that are blooming there. That looks like that may be pampas grass or something in the back. But that's just a picture of the flowers. I might note that transferring this from the slides to put it on VCR doesn't seem to bring out the color that seems to show up in these slides. And these slides are old. They're 20 years old. In fact, this is February of 1992. So these slides only lack 2 or 3 weeks of being 20 years old, like the tops of a palm tree or something that may be growing along there. But it shows you the difference in some of the vegetation they have here as compared to central Missouri. We're here again as you look out along the coastal mountains, and it's very difficult to get a clear time when you can take a picture of the mountains, because as you look back over there, you always have kind of a fog or a haze or whatever it is toward these mountains. You never really get a clear shot from this area looking into the mountains. We're down along the beach here now, where the hotel is, not far from the hotel. In fact, it's probably on the hotel grounds, and you can see the people down along the beach. They turn out here, and although it's American owned, they let the local natives come and have access to the beach here. But that's the beach area looking toward the Caribbean beach, and these little cabanas that they put up here, these little shades. As I said, this was in the dead of winter when we went to Venezuela. And there was a doctor on board, and they warned us not to get out into the sun. Although the temperature was not that hot, it was the fact that we were right at the dead of winter. Our skins were very sun sensitive, and some of the people went out, got too much sun exposure, and they were actually treated for sunburn, and some of them became quite ill just from getting too much sun. The Venezuelan national television came down, and they had a model. We didn't get close enough to get a picture of her. But she was doing a bathing suit commercial, or some kind of a commercial in her bathing suit, and this was the film crew that was from the national television down there filming this commercial. Earlier, that one of the differences was in their seasons from summer to winter in Venezuela was mainly the drought, the lack of rainfall. It's really not a drought, it's an annual event, but also the winds that come up. And these winds do create quite a surf on the Caribbean. Normally they tell us that during the rest of the year that the Caribbean is one of the smoothest bodies of waters around, but you can see some of the ocean tides here. Little concession booth along there. You could go in there, and they had a popcorn machine. You could buy some of the magazines, souvenirs. They all know what the Yankee dollar is down there. They may tell you that they can't speak English, but if they see a dollar, they sure can make a deal with you. Another one of the marinas where you could go in there. There's cars parked under there, but actually it's just a marina where you could buy boats, whatever you wanted there. Garage down there, as you can see it. The interesting thing about this garage is that it was just a wall around there. There was no roof on it. They actually worked out in the open. They wouldn't allow us inside, but they do. Today, if you're familiar with Venezuela and Caracas, they're having the riots down there. And that was nothing common. In fact, when we landed at the airport, and you saw a picture of it, and I failed to mention this a few minutes ago, when we landed there, boy, we thought we were getting the royal treatment because the red carpet had been rolled out and everything. Well, come to find out, there had just an hour before we had got there. In fact, we were the first commercial plane in after the president of Argentina had left. It was the first time that a president of Argentina had visited the president of Venezuela. Both countries are a democracy, not so much as we understand it, but they have presidents and all of that, and governments, a Senate similar to ours, and these two had visited. They're so afraid of riots and things down there because they've had so much dictators in the last 100 or 150 years that everything is barred. And we saw this red carpeting. Well, then when we went into Venezuela, we would go through these tunnels and under these underpasses, and they all had the National Army of Venezuela. These were armed guards, and they had them there in the airport walking around to protect themselves and to make sure that nobody blew up the bridges or nobody done any damages. The schools and some of the businesses had been closed in Venezuela because they were afraid that the opposition would come in and stir up trouble and they would cause these riots. And even today we see that going on in Venezuela this very week, that they're having the problems there that they were afraid of 20 years ago when the president of Venezuela was there. Wholesome bread in Missouri, you know, that used to be the bread to have in Missouri, but now of course Wholesome has been bought out by the Butternut Company, by Interstate Bakeries, and we don't have Wholesome. But there was a Wholesome bread truck down in Venezuela. The shot is of a meat delivery being made here. The truck, much like ours, with one possible exception. Because of the climate, because of the lack of insects and anything which might cause any problem there, they simply do not really have to have much refrigeration. And I don't know whether this shows it or not, but it showed that the man was bringing in a hog carcass into this store, and after he carried the carcass in, then he went out and made another trip in, and he brought the head and the livers and hearts and everything in on another stick. But this is a meat delivery being made here in Venezuela. That coconut tree. This is the crew I was telling you about, and if you look, it's a late 40s model Dodge truck with a dump bed on it. The fellow got up there on top of the bed, and they raised the bed up, and he's up there with a machete cutting these coconuts down, and when he got them cut down, they just fell down on the ground. Why, the men took them, and the natives know how to open them, and they drank the juice out of them and then cut them open and ate the meat. And that was their mid-morning bite of them, and these are the workers standing around. The rest of them had been on the crew. They were just standing there waiting for this boy to cut the other coconuts down. For them cut down, now they're all sitting around there, and they're having their break, taking their time out. As I told you, the weather there is mild year-round, and of course they had, and this is a watermelon stand. And you can see that they use an enterprise system about like we do here in the United States. Home of one of the government officials, and I can't tell you which one. He lived in this home. It was not in Venezuela. It was down close to where we were at. He may have been the local politician there. I can't really recall the total story on it, but he was one of the muckety-mucks, one of the officials there in the government. And you can see the walled fortress that he lived in. Those are guards up there in the tower. Of course, even though they're armed and they're there to protect him, and particularly at this time, they were very friendly, and they knew that we were Americans. And most of the Venezuelans, I shouldn't say most, but many of them that you meet, if their families can afford it at all, they have sent their boys We didn't meet any girls, but they have sent the young men to the United States to be educated, and many of them have gone to school in the United States. We have to go to Washington, D.C. to see many of our national statues. Of course, we're here in the capital city of Venezuela. They honor all of their national heroes, and this one probably is a statue of Bolivar, who was the liberator. He was the George Washington of South America, and this may have been one of his statues commemorating him. But all over the city of Venezuela, you'll find many, many statues. We took a tram ride, and we went up along the coast, got on this thing and went over and just took this ride. I wish Betty were here. She could probably tell you more about where we went and what we were doing. But it was just a tram that you would find like here in America, going up from Albuquerque up to the Sandia Mountains or some of the others. And so we took a ride on this. Now, there was another group that went a week later. And, of course, you're quite close to the ground in places there, maybe only 20 feet above some of these drop-offs in the mountain. But when you get on down, why, you may be several hundred feet above the ground on this tram. But it was quite a ride, and we enjoyed it, and there's more pictures of that here. But the week following, there was another group of Weatherall people. In fact, they came down on the airplane that we came back on, and when they took this ride because of the drought, somehow a fire had got started close to this tram line, and they had to shut the tram down, and they were suspended out there for a length of time. It seemed to me like 2 or 3 hours while they fought this fire and got the fire out so they could bring this tram down, because it was in one of the areas which the tram was fairly close to the ground. This thing is counterbalanced. As they go up, one comes down, and that's how the thing runs. It isn't run by electricity or anything like that. I guess there is some backup, but primarily it's a counterbalancing operation. As one comes down, it pulls the other one up. A lot of Caracas there in the background as we're going up through the tram, taking through the window of this tram. Here you're at this big hotel. That's what it is. Comes back to me now. Looks like the Wall of China going up around there, but it isn't. You could either walk up there or you could take the tram. And, of course, you could drive part way up and then walk the rest, however you wanted to go. But this hotel is built up on the mountaintop. It's a very lovely hotel. It's an American-owned hotel. I can't tell you who owns it. It seems to me like it's part of the Hilton Corporation. And it's there, and then the National Television Tower is located there on top of this of the mountains as we were coming down off the tram. And as you can see, coming through here, we're fairly close to ground level. And then you'll come to one of these drop-offs where it's a cliff-type thing, a bluff area, and you may be several hundred feet suspended out there in the air. But right along here anyway, we're very close, probably 20, 30 feet above the ground as we look across the valley there at the other mountain. You can see that it's very definitely mountains. You can see the little mountain road down there. You can see the crossroad down in the valley there, where one of the roads where they go different directions. But just taking, it's a plexiglass dome, and so it isn't quite as clear. But nevertheless, even in the mountains, it's not always very clear. Another view taken from the mountains. We're a little bit more in the sunlight here. And again, you can see, it looks like here we're suspended quite a ways. Okay, we'll resume here. I had to change boxes of slides here. I have them on 3 different boxes, so we're on the second box now. As you look here, you can see one of the homes that has been built up along the mountain area here. I can't go into any more detail than that. Probably taken from the tram as we went along, but there's a home, mountain home in Venezuela. Caracas again. I think what this is, we're probably getting up into the poverty area, and just some of the homes there in Venezuela shows you that they're not very prosperous, most of them. There are only 2 classes of people in Venezuela: those who are rich, and they're very rich, and those who are poor, and believe me, they are very poor. But that's just some of the homes there along the mountains in the city of Caracas. You can see that Caracas itself is actually built right in the mountains. It's not along a coastline. As I told you, it's about 5 or 6 miles from the coast into the mountains before you get into this cradle and this valley of where Caracas is located. All right, again, it's just a few more of these homes and another scene taken. Some of the scenery there in Venezuela. All right, as we were driving along, they had signs there, much like that we have in America. Of course, I think even though you may not be able to read the sign there, you surely be able to make out the message there. Shows an automobile plus drinking equals the skull. And so they're warning the people there not to drink and to drive. Me too, I should have previewed these signs before I went along and done anything with it. But there was a town back in the mountains, and I can't recall it's Colonial Tovar is the name of this town. And they were Swedish people that came to the area of Venezuela. They went up into the mountains. It's about 35 miles from Caracas back into the mountains, and they built this little town. Of course, they settled the town, as you can see there, in 1843. And the town sat there for quite a while, and nobody had forgot about it. It was known as the Lost Village. And finally, in the 1900s, I believe about 1920, there were a group of people that went up there, and they found this town that had been up there for almost 100 years, 80 years. And people had lived there. They were very self-sufficient. They didn't get out. They didn't mix with the other people. And it was known as Colonial Tovar, the lost city of Venezuela. Clean, beautiful little town. Of course, with the Swiss background, the people primarily were from Switzerland and that part of Europe. They were very clean and very dedicated. They built their houses. They just lived there self-sufficiently, as they might have lived in Switzerland, and they lived there for about 80 years and forgotten. But it is a very, very lovely town, and we were fortunate by having the tour to take us to this town of Colonial Tovar. Of course, now that it's been discovered, it's like going up into the mountains in Colorado to the old mining villages. It's a sightseeing tour now, or place now. And you can see the cars along there. But again, I want you to keep this in mind and to contrast it to part of Caracas that we will see here. There's no poverty. The houses are immaculate. The people are very well educated, very self-sufficient, very cleanly. Close-up of one of the houses that they have there, showing you the flavor of the European mountain people as they build these houses, and the how clean, how lovely. And remember, this village was settled about 130 years before we were there, but look how well and neat and well kept this village is. Here is the church at this little town of Colonial Tovar, and isn't that just, it's just something out of a picture book. And it was one of the highlights of our tour, and I wish we'd have had more time and known of it first. We could have gone there and really enjoyed it. But this is the church there in the city of Colonial Tovar, the lost city of Venezuela. Again, this is just another tour group of some of the homes, restaurants, whatever it is along there, people going to visit. But again, notice how lovely and how well kept this little town is. I think this is pretty self-explanatory. I think that's Betty probably coming out of there in that pink suit. She had took a suit with her. It was one where she had a pair of slacks and a skirt and everything. It was all the same color. It was hot pink. Remember that. Hot pink, Betty. Remember. Now you're going to ask me who these boys are. And I can't really tell you who they are. But as we were up there in Colonial Tovar, we met this group of young men. And they are, I say young men, they were in their late teens, early 20s. And they are Venezuelan Boy Scouts. And they were up visiting the city of Colonial Tovar. And boy, they're all hams. You get a Venezuelan together and two or three of them, and boy, they want their pictures taken. That's the one thing they like. They like to have their pictures taken. And some of these young men told us that they had been to the United States and had gone to school here. And they told us about the different schools that they had gone to. But they are very likable, and they speak very, very good English. And we had no trouble with them, and we really had a ball talking to these Boy Scouts. And of course, they all got together, and you can see the one there giving the V sign for all of that. He was one of them that had been to America. But they are Venezuelan Boy Scouts. Now this guy is for real. Now, he wouldn't turn around, I don't think, where we could get his picture. He's kind of like a Mennonite. But he was a man that lived in the mountains around there by Colonial Tovar. and he had come into town on his donkey or his mule to do some trading. And of course he had a backpack and he got what he wanted and he was ready to go back home. But he was one of the natives there, and like I say, this guy is for real. This isn't put on. This is the way the guy actually lived, and he was quite unusual. I don't know how it's going to show up on the film, but this is a shot taking of the city of Caracas itself. I hope it shows up because you can see the basin there that it's built in. It's about 5,000 or 6,000 feet above sea level, or maybe I'm wrong. I'm thinking of Denver. This is about 3,000 or 4,000 feet above sea level, and it's built down. Of course, you can see the mountains towering above it. Some of the mountains are 7,000, 8,000 feet, but it's built down right in this valley, in the mountains, just inland from the coastal Caribbean area of Venezuela, on the very northern tip. Venezuela is a large country, but Caracas is on the very northern tip of the country of Venezuela. Okay, again, another shot of it taken, and it reminds you quite a bit of downtown Denver as you see the mountains in the background. This area of Caracas is new. It's the business area, the government area. The buildings are new, and like I say, much of Venezuela is owned by American oil money. The Mobil Oil Company, the Shell Oil, the Rockefellers own a great lot of Venezuela, and to get the American people down there, and particularly the engineers and the technicians that they need, they even own shopping centers, huge shopping centers, and American food is available down there. We saw a lot of Oscar Mayer products, and just anything that you can find in America, you can find in Venezuela, in Caracas, because the oil companies in particular want these modern shopping centers and things to attract the people that they need to carry on the oil business there in Caracas. Again, the downtown area of Caracas, and you can see it looks like much like any other town in North America, a large city, St. Louis, Kansas City, any of those towns, except for the climate, which is very, very moderate. I probably got in the way of this one, but there again you can see the downtown area. Don Disco, I guess that's a name down there, but you can see just like downtown USA. Last night on television I was watching, and just turned in the last of the network news, and Tom Brokaw, I guess, was in Moscow, and he was showing modern day Moscow, and one of the things that stuck out was a Coca-Cola sign down in Moscow. And one of the things that reminded us of home here, again, was the Pepsi-Cola sign atop this large building. It looks like an apartment house, much like you'd see in Southern California or in Florida. We didn't get to go see a bullfight, but there you can see a sign that was advertising, and I believe it was a couple of weeks that they would begin the bullfight season down there. And they were getting people ready for it. There you can see a sign, and I'm sure that's a pharmacy there from the looks of it. I don't speak Spanish, but that looks like what that could be there. Okay, as I told you, while we were there, they had closed all of the schools and the universities because they were afraid that these young people would riot while the president of Argentina was there, and they'd have to have an armed rebellion to put these people down. But as you can see here, we're going past the University of Caracas in Venezuela. And of course, they're instead of being the Tigers or something like that, they were the Bombardiers or whatever. Bombitors was their name. So this is part of the university there in Caracas. Another one of the many statues there in Caracas. And like I say, I don't know who this one is commemorating, but many of them are in honor of Simón Bolívar, who was the liberator, the George Washington of South America. One of the buildings now, I believe this is one of the government buildings that we went in. I don't remember being in any of the churches, maybe we were, but this is one of the government buildings, and you can see the guards there along the side as they stood guard over this part of this government building. Some important document there on the pedestal. Here again, we're inside of the government building. It may be equal to our nation's capital. I'm not really sure, but you can see the murals there on the wall, much like we would have at least in the Missouri State House in Jefferson City. You can see the murals that have been painted. I hope this shows up good on the screen. Again, this is just some of the complex down there. It looks like a business complex, and you can see the mountains there in the background, see the buses and everything. You don't see quite the cars there that you see, and of course they all drive like they do in Mexico. You know, it's whoever's got the most guts has the right of way, I think. But they're loud, they're big with horns, but this is one of the modern buildings there in the city of Caracas. Here again we're looking at one of the shopping centers that was built up. I'm sure this is American money. It's been put there so that would give the oil workers and those in the oil business a sense of being at home. And of course this looks like a bowling alley to me. Yeah, I'm sure that this is probably this shopping center. We're just walking down through it, and you can see it's enclosed here, but it just looks like any shopping center that you'd find in any large city in the United States. All right, we're looking here, and I think this is the heart of downtown Caracas. It's along this plaza here where you go around in a circle and everything. And believe me, I have no idea of how you can drive around this thing and not have a fender bender everywhere you go. But this is the way it's designed. Traffic comes in, goes around it. Everybody seems to make it. A lot of horn honking, and there's statues there in this plaza. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this is a Bolivar Plaza in downtown Caracas. Shot of it there with their statue, government buildings there all in the background, and you can see it's much like any city in any part of the United States, particularly for a capital city of the state or the country. Cathedrals, beautiful. As you know, that Venezuela is primarily Catholic. In fact, I think they boast that they're about 95% Catholic. They told us they did have freedom of religion. They said that, I think, just as a matter of formality. But primarily, you're Catholic or you're pretty well an outcast with some degree of persecution because of your religious beliefs. And just another shot of the church showing you the belfry, showing you the statue there on top of it, the clock and everything that's there. Very, very, very beautiful. Of course, as you can see, this is a shot of the interior of the church. You're seeing the beautiful, beautiful stained glass and the scenes that it depicts. You're seeing the gold at the altar. You're seeing the picture. Of course, I believe that's the Virgin Mary that you're looking at there. Very, very beautiful. Gorgeous. Again, you're looking at some of the government buildings, and I believe this is probably the Capitol building here in Venezuela, with the gold dome and everything on it. You can see the walls around it. This is all built for fortification, so that if there is an uprising and all, that they'll be protected there. But I believe this is probably the Capitol building of Venezuela. Another view. Very beautiful. Very magnificent. And as I say, you have either the beauty or you have the very, very poor. I think, again, this is another shot of that plaza area and the statue that we saw there. This would be a monument, Simon Bolivar, about like our Washington statue memorial in Washington, D.C., or the one depicting Lincoln, but this is one of their great national monuments here in the city of Caracas. No need to comment. She must have had these done on Wednesday. It was twofer day at Kmart or wherever she had them developed. But this is just another picture taken of the Simon Bolivar statue there in Caracas. All right, again, this is just another shot of the basin there, connected, I think, with the government buildings there in Venezuela, Caracas. You can see the mountains in the background. Very, very inspiring. We're there with a couple that we met from Kentucky. They were on the tour together. They're like us. They were just common people. They weren't store owners or managers. They're on kind of a limited budget, but they were there enjoying it too. We went with them and took several cab rides around the city, shared expenses so we could see what was there. I've just put in our third tray of slides here. This is the last tray. I think we're going back to that government officials compound there along La Guaira. If you look right by the tree, you can see a guard standing there. You can just see the top of his head. They let you take the picture, but they weren't supposed to be photographed, so they wouldn't really pose for you. But I believe that this is probably out of sequence, and you saw part of it a few minutes back in this. But please forgive us. This is strictly amateur, and I haven't gone through these slides for quite a while. Along with that, I'm having some trouble with the projector. It doesn't seem to want to work. I think it's just sat there for so long. It's got so much dust and grit in it that it's not really working. And every now and then I have to go over there and kick it to get it to work. But that's one of the pictures of the government compound there. One of the things that we did while we were there in Caracas that we thought was rather unusual, because of the impending oil situation which took place a year later, our government had sent down an admiral, Navy admiral, one of the top admirals, to meet with the Venezuelan people too, and I think he was there along with his ship while the Argentina president was there, just to give him a show of force. But there was a United States Navy vessel there in port, and this is looking in to part of the control room on this Navy ship. In fact, I think that those are the throttles there. The captain gives the command, and the whoever's at the throttle gives the power that is needed to move this boat around, or this ship around. It is. It's very definitely out of sequence again, isn't it? I think this is just some more of the view there. Boy, these must be a hodgepodge of film, because this looks like it's part of the film there from Colonial Tovar. America, she's standing there in front of our hotel room. We were very fortunate in finding the hotel room. When we went down, they told us where our room was, and they said, go down this hall and keep going and keep going and keep going. And we were about as far from the front desk, I think, as we could get. And we thought, boy, where are they putting us? But when we got to our room, it was right here along the ground level. We could just open the sliding doors there and walk right out. We were right out along the swimming pool area and not far from the beach area at all. Boy, you talk about birds and things. You never heard of so many subtropical birds and the racket that they would make early in the morning and late at night. But this is what it was. This is our hotel room, and it's just like going to any American hotel and being right at pool level. Again, we're back at the hotel, and we're looking at the area in which the boats are anchored. You come in from the Caribbean, come in and anchor your boat right along there. This area at Macuta, I might go into detail what we found out about this area. When Columbus came to America, supposedly this is where he landed, and this is where he found the natives. And of course the natives there are kind of red-skinned, and he thought indeed he was in India, because although he'd never seen anyone from India, he heard that they were red-skinned, and he just knew he had landed in India. Instead of that, he was in the New World. And he bartered and traded with these natives, the Macuta Indians, and they were the ones that he actually took back to Spain with him on his trip back to prove that he had indeed been to India. This part of the Caribbean, as you come right up along these mountains, is a deep sea port. The port of New York is a shallow port, and there they have to go out with the tugs, and they have channels and everything where they bring these large ships in, and by use of tugs they bring them in. This is not so here along the port of Macuta and the port of La Guaira. These ships can actually just be brought in by power right up to the dock, just like you'd bring a rowboat into a dock down at the Lake of the Ozark and tie these ships up. They do not need tugs or anything like this. The water is right up against the mountain area there. It drops off at several hundred feet deep, and so they have what they call a deep water port. We have some of these ports. I think Norfolk, Virginia, a Navy base there. I think that's one of our deep water ports, some of you old salts. I think San Diego is a deep water port along with San Francisco, in which the same thing, the ships just can move right up to dock and be moored right at the dock without any assistance from any of the tugs in the shallow water. But we're looking at some of the boats here along the coast. I doubt if this shows up too well on the tape, but I'll go ahead and make a comment about it anyway. As we were going up to the old city of Colonial Tovar, this was an old cemetery that has been there. In fact, I think it's part of the of Colonial Tovar, but it's an old Venezuelan cemetery. Again, it's a fairly clear day. I don't see any clouds at all in this picture of just one of the boats going out. Queenie is the name of that boat. Going out, probably a fishing boat, maybe even taking someone out to fish. But the water looks fairly calm there. Of course, they're in close to the bay. They may be in and behind a breakwater or something where it doesn't really get too rough. This is probably a duplicate of one of the slides that you saw earlier, just showing you some of the breakwater as it comes up to shore off the Caribbean. And again, it's fairly rough at this time of year. All right, another shot, just much like looking at the dunes in Indiana. If you've ever been up to the Indiana dunes and look over Lake Michigan towards Chicago, except we're in the coastline of Venezuela here, and we're looking out across the Caribbean Ocean there, Caribbean Sea. Shows up, you can see the breakers as they hit the reef there as it juts out from the shoreline. And again, you get some idea of how rough that water is. If you look in the background, you can see one of the, looks like just a boat. I don't think that's what I'd call a ship, but it's one of the boats out there. And if you weren't an old salt and really prone at all to be seasick, you wouldn't want to be out on that water at this time of day. Okay, there they are. And if you look, you can see some swimmers out there. See the one on the rock and see the ones out there in the water. Look on over there, you can see where the waves are breaking against the breaker over there. Looks like a sailboat out there in the distance. A group of us there as we are walking along, took the picture. One of the many places, just like we have here, selling these little rafts, life savers, whatever you might have there, blow-up toys of all kinds. Okay, this has been put back in this last box of slides. And again, it's taken from the altar area of the cathedral that we were in earlier. It's pretty hard to see because it was dark in there and they didn't have a great lot of lights. It was all candle lights around this altar. And I guess you could go there and put an offering or make a prayer or whatever you wanted to there at this altar. I think if you probably look here, the reason Betty took this picture of it's a nude man. You can see him out there in the water. Actually, this is the beach area there along the hotel. And as I say, they allowed the natives to come in there and have access to the beach area. All of the older people, of course, are dressed just like we are in bathing suits, although they allow the small children probably up 4 or 5 years old, to run around naked. Boys or girls, doesn't make any difference. As long as they're small, why they let them run around. And I think this is probably just unusual. If it had been in America, Mama would have been out there putting these pants on him so he wouldn't be seen. But the young children there just run around without any clothes, particularly when they go swimming. Now, they wear them at home, but when they go to the beach, why they're allowed to run around sans clothes. They are taken from a picture of this USS Navy ship that was there in dock. And again, you can see some of the dock areas. You can see some of the ocean. Those look like oil tankers. Maybe they're in the background where they're being loaded up with oil. But like I say, you can just bring those ships right in from the ocean and drive them right up to the dock. This boat, if you look at the floor, and I think the reason that I took this, the floor of this ship is made out of solid teak wood. They went to India or somewhere, Burma. I believe it came from Burma. And this is solid teak. And they've put it in there because this was a battleship, and the guns are all mounted into this teak wood. It was the only thing that was strong enough to hold these guns down. They couldn't mount them on steel plates, and so they used this teak wood to mount those gun turrets. There's one of the officers aboard the ship, and I think as we got to visiting with him, we found out that he was from somewhere down here around Richland in Missouri, and he was a naval officer, and here we were within 150 miles of his home, and we had travel clear out of the country to see a boy from down around Richland who was a naval officer. Okay, that's a view of this battleship that you can see. They're in dock, and I think that they brought it in as just kind of a show of force, that they had the U.S. Navy on their side, and while the president of Argentina was there, not to get too rambunctious because they might turn these guns on them and somehow, but anyway, he was there. He was on a goodwill mission too, meeting with the government officials, the admiral on board this ship. There was a full-fledged admiral that was on this ship. He was a fleet commander or whatever, but he had come in to meet with these government officials on a very high-level social call. There you can see the guns. Of course, they're all plugged. I guess they keep them plugged, keep the water out of them when they're on the sea. But that's just another shot of this battleship. I can't even tell you the name of it. I knew at the time, but I'm not even familiar with it now as to what it is. But it's a USS naval vessel. They're docked at the harbor there at Macuta, La Guaira area of Venezuela. There's a helicopter. I think they had those there, and I think they told us that they were there at the weren't normally stationed on board this battleship, but because of the admiral being there, that this was his transportation, and he could take these helicopters, and that he could go wherever he wanted to then in the country of Venezuela. We are back at the hotel where we started out. I don't know how many more we have on here. I guess a few more, but that's a shot again of the picture of the hotel there in Macuta. There's another shot of us getting ready to leave on our way. Looks like we better get on there. Somebody will have our seats. I got my hat in my hand and a bacon again. I don't know who those three are, how they even got in here, but they look vaguely familiar. Perhaps some of you have seen them running around somewhere. Well, there they are again. Looks like the same three. How many shots of these do we have here, but they look familiar. Well, there's an individual shot. My goodness. Well, that takes care of our little tour. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'm sorry that I'm not the historian that I should have been. It's been 20 years ago since I've seen a lot of these films when we made them. But we had a good time. I hope I'll be able to get on another trip somewhere to take another vacation of that. Price was right because our way was paid. All we needed was some money for our expenses. But we'll close now, and we'll let you all get home, get to bed, and whatever. And I think we bored you probably for about 30 minutes. So we'll just shut it down here until the next time.